Hi, this is Chuck Benedict, mentor for Team 997 Spartan Robotics in Corvallis, Oregon. I uh, I know I'm going to get some controversy for this video, but the more I try to help my team out, I come to this conclusion, and I've just got to say it: never, ever, ever, ever use the WPI provided VS Code templates as the starting point for your next robot program. And in particular, I'm talking about the CommandRobot template. And so I'm going to spend this video talking about why that is. And in the next series of videos, I'm going to show you why it is that you don't want to do that through coming up with a very simple robot project, kind of from start to finish, where I illustrate best practices. Now, really what this all surrounds is testability. I would say that the CommandRobot program that exists today inside the VS Code plugin is completely untestable, and that's just a bad thing. Testability is so important. Students, you should be able to write code and immediately get instant feedback on whether the code that you write works or not, and to have a template show you right out of the gate the worst possible practices that you can do to make it so that you can't test is just terrible. Now, I'm sure the authors of WPI have reasons, and as new students, you want to be able to have something that you can very quickly get started and actually produce something working on a robot. And so there's definitely ways that you can take shortcuts that sort of get you from that A to B path very, very fast. Problem with that is that, I have second, even third year students now who that's all they've learned. You go in fact, this is what they do. Control-Shift-P, new. We're going to do WPI, and we're going to say create new project. And they're going to pick a template. We're going to select Java. We are going to pick the CommandRobot. Going to stick it in my documents, and I'm going to call it Testable Robot. Generate project. All right, here's what you get. First thing out of the gate that I'm going to call out, there's no directory called test. So right away, I know that testing is going to be challenged because the author of this didn't even consider testing to be an important element. So second thing that you see here, and I've covered this in a couple other videos. I didn't really sort of directly address it as to why it's a bad thing. So here we go. So in the object-oriented world, properties that live inside your classes are what's called the component state, and the component state, it's up to the class to maintain its own component state. And I like to think of the state of an object as like this treasure that you don't want to show to the outside world, lest the outside world steal it or do something to it that you don't want. So right away, when I see stuff like this, bad, that is taking the state of the robot class and it's exposing it to the outside world for anybody to use or abuse or whatever. So right out of the gate, that's very, very bad. These things should always be declared. In very rare circumstances, should they be declared anything other than private. Sometimes you might make them protected if you want to share them and inherit them with subclasses, but even then, that can be dangerous because of something called invariance that we'll talk about here in a minute. unless your properties are your member variables are declared as private, you start opening yourself up to more and more and more problems. So I would always declare these things as private. And then static, again, why does this need to be static? Statics are things that when I see in Java, always raises suspicion. I'm always like, wait a minute, why is that declared static? Because statics are abused, they're overused, and this is an object-oriented language. This isn't C. So, when you have classes, classes are meant to be instantiated things to which you get a reference of, the embodiment of that class at runtime. And so when you create static things, those things, there's only one of them for all of the possible instantiated objects that you can get. And there are uses for that. By and large, they're not good use. I mean, the narrow uses that exist may be good, but by and large, there's really no reason to do it. So I would not call this static. I would just call this private and leave it at that. Make it an instance variable. All right. So that's the first thing that I would do to this to make it better. So again, why is this not testable? Actually, let me revert this. I'm going to revert this back to the way this was. Okay. So because this is public, because this is public, what this can mean is that from the outside world, you can actually make references to this static member variable to this class. So what does that mean? What that means is that when we go look at the example command that's in here, right out of the gate, in the example command constructor, there's a requires method call made that takes robot.mSubsystem. That is this variable right here. What does that imply then? When you instantiate example command, what's the first thing that happens? Very first thing. The very first thing that happens is the robot class gets all of these static methods on the robot class get initted. And so that means that this call right here gets called. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that the subsystem, this example subsystem, if we go in here, now this subsystem has nothing in it, but presumably it's going to have hardware because it's a subsystem interacting with stuff in the outside world. So this subsystem is going to have hardware in it. And when that subsystem is instantiated, the hardware is going to be instantiated. And guess what? If you don't have your program, if your program's not running on a thing with real hardware, your program's going to crash. And so this example command can't even be instantiated in that instance. And so if you can't even instantiate a class, how the heck can you unit test it? Well, the fact is you can't. So these are some of the examples of why I say this template is just not good. Don't use it. And I'm going to show you some examples here in some subsequent videos about what you do to this template to actually make it testable. I guess one final thing is that, so there's this class called OI, stands for Operator Interface. It's the thing that the template is encouraging you to use to hook the operator console control devices like joysticks and gamepads up to commands that can actually, cause your robot to do stuff. Well, again, I've seen second and third year students do stuff like the following. They comment this out, and they comment that out, and they do this, just like that. And so, and I've got problems because I've got syntax, I don't have my includes up in here Funny thing, the author didn't put the imports in to make this work. But in any case, I actually see code like this. Now, some of you may go, well, wait a minute, how is that even legal? How is it that you're even able to call a method inside a class without any sort of method block? I mean, it's sort of just sitting here in the class. Is that even legal? Yeah, it is legal. What's going to happen is that this code is going to execute because there is no constructor in this class. Java will, under the covers, create a constructor for you, a default constructor with no parameters. It's actually not technically correct. I'm not going to go into the minutia details of the Java VM, but assume that it creates a default constructor with no parameters, and it actually calls this code that's in here. Okay, so that's all fine, I guess, but what happens? The robot program, if we go look over here in robot init calls it creates a new instance of the operator interface. Well, because this operator interface gives you, you're hardwiring your hardware components to commands in here, there is no possible way then that you can abstract out and mock up those hardware components from the robot program such that you can break the robot program apart into pieces and actually even it's impossible to unit test the robot program. So these, and again, like I said, I see second and third year students doing stuff like this. Does it work? Yeah, it does work, but it's impossible to test. They don't know any better though, because the template gives them no sort of clue or inkling that this is just not the best way to go about it. And they're beginning programming students. That's the first time some of them have ever coded anything, so they don't know any better. So get with that intro. I am going to do, like I said, a very simple program in subsequent videos where I show better ways of going about doing this. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching.